We often get asked by our clients to explain what a typical real estate syndication or offering structure looks like. So I'm going to walk through that with you, and let me show you what a sample organizational chart would look like. So typically, what we have is in a typical commercial real estate syndication where a group of investors come together and pool their money. You've got up here is the property. This is the real estate being acquired or that they already own and are developing. Then typically what's called the issuer of the security, that means the company that's basically doing the syndication, is at this level. And this is the syndicate entity. Investors invest in this entity, and it can be an LLC or an LP, limited partnership. Right here, I have it listed as a limited liability company, which is pretty common because of the flexibility of LLCs. And this 100% owns the property. It becomes the borrower on any loans. Then down here, the owner of the issuer. Over here, you've got basically your investors, which are Class A members, typically is the way that we structure it. And they might own a direct 70% or 80% ownership interest in this company, which owns 100% of the property. And usually these percentages are based on what the split is going to be between the investors and the sponsor or manager of the deal. So the sponsor, a lot of times will set up a separate manager entity and that will be owned down here by the sponsorship team. They'll own this entity right here, and their carried interest or promote and any fees will be paid down through here. So they might own a 30% or 20% interest, and that represents their carried interest, their promote. As you can see, the promoter carried interest splits are paid down here. So this is usually split up somewhere between 70-30, 80-20. Sometimes it can be 100%, 0%, and this entity just gets what's considered a profits interest. That's a little bit more complicated, so I won't get into too much of that today. Then you add another layer in some cases, an SPE or single or special purpose entity is added in between the property and the issuer. And typically this is going to be a Delaware LLC owned 100% by the issuer, and it becomes the borrower on any loan. And the reason this is put in is usually it's a lender requirement, basically to help protect the lender in the event of some kind of default, bankruptcy, something. They can take control of this SPE to have control of the property and protect their investment. Everything else is still the same. The issuer down here, your investors over here, and your sponsor entity over here. Now, this is a little bit more complex where you've got some of the investors might have 1031 tax deferred or tax exempt proceeds that they're bringing from another property. They want to invest them in the deal. And in order to comply with 1031 requirements, they have to own a direct ownership interest of the property. They can't invest over here, or they would just own a percentage of this issuer company and not real property itself. And so they wouldn't comply with 1031. So in that case, usually you set up a tenants in common or TIC LLC over here, and the 1031 investor brings their proceeds in here, and they become a certain percentage owner depending on how much money they're putting in compared to everyone else. So they might be a 1%, 5% owner of the property. In some cases, they have to be a borrower on the loan as well. So it makes it a little bit more complex and problematic. Then everything else on this side is still the same. You've got the normal issuer company, manager entity for the sponsor and GP team, and the other regular investor members over here. So basically this would be split up. If there's $10 million being put in, the 1031 proceeds are $1 million. And over here, you're raising $9 million. So it would be, a 90-10 split of ownership between the issuer 90% and the TIC LLC would have 10%, the other 10%. Then it can get a little bit more complex as well if you bring in a JV or preferred equity partner. This is usually a larger investor, and they're going to want to have a JV entity involved. That goes in the structure right here in yellow, typically in between the SPE and the issuer company. Everything else down here is the same as the prior slides, but you've added in these two yellow entities where you've got the JV entity and then the preferred equity partner that's usually going to get their pref or their preferred equity prior to the other investors down here. Another option of a way to bring in a JV partner also is to have a separate class of membership within the LLC, the issuer. So instead of having Class A members be the investors, Class B members be the GP team, you add a third layer, basically Class A for your preferred, Class B for regular, you consider common investors, and then Class C for the management entity. So you'd have a different waterfall within this issuer, so where the Class A gets paid out first, then to B and C. But this just depends on the JV partner that's coming in, what their requirements are. There's all kinds of different complexities and different types of structures that you can do. Basically, these are just the most common ones.